To introduce myself, I'm Pat Cooke. I'm the VP of Business Solutions here at EXP. Just a little bit of background. I originally trained as an architect, but I've worked in technology for the last 30 years or so. I've been with EXP since 2016, so nearly 2 years. Formerly, I was the CIO of a national healthcare company, and some areas of expertise are SharePoint and associated systems, application design and development, analytics, CRM systems, security and compliance, and business process management. Today we'll have about a 30-minute presentation with some time at the end for questions and answers. Just a couple of things about the webinar format. If you see Alison Lord, that's me. It just happens to be the account for the webinar. If you want to ask a question, there's a Q&A button, should be at the bottom of your screen. Just type it in there. We will have everybody muted just because it's hard to manage multiple participants. So if you do have a question, feel free to ask it at any time, and then I will address questions during the Q&A period at the end. So the goals of this little webinar that we put together is to provide our clients with a general understanding of some tools, cloud-based tools that they probably already have, or let's assume that just about everybody has Office 365, and then illustrate how you could use those tools to improve productivity, collaboration, security. And we'd also like, during the Q&A session, to get feedback on areas of interest. There's a lot to cover, so I'll move fairly quickly. And again, if there are particular areas of interest, we can talk about them during the Q&A session, and I'm happy to discuss anything with people offline after the webinar. So the agenda, we'll talk a little bit about the trends in cloud transformation and how they affect or not affect productivity, cloud storage and virtual desktop infrastructure, file access in the cloud, project management, collaboration, some tools that are available to you there, integration and automation, then client relationship management, marketing automation, and digital asset management. There's actually, I think, some pretty good tools available in Office 365 for that don't necessarily have to cost a lot. Analytics and business intelligence, how that can help your business, knowledge management skills and training, and then lastly, security and compliance, which I think needs to be at the top of everybody's list these days. So some effects of cloud technologies in small, medium business, architecture, engineering, construction. Obviously, a lot of positive trends. The financial people like the subscription model, predictable costs, CapEx expense versus operating expense, continuous upgrades, accessibility. You can access your application from anywhere, from your iPhone, iPad, Android, whatever, at home. Increased app interoperability. Now this is increasing. It's not where we would like to see it as yet, but there's definite focus on interoperability. Then of course reduction. Over time the complexity that existed in the office will exist in the cloud, in that servers, backups, etc., will not be in the office anymore. Right now, we're sort of in a hybrid phase for most architectural engineering construction firms, mainly because of the file size, CAD file size, and latency of accessing them in the cloud. Business continuity and geographic redundancy is a very good aspect of cloud technologies. I'm not sure everybody knows this, but you can actually choose where your data is stored in Office 365. It's geographic region. And then, of course, there's some negative aspects. I think there's somewhat of an illusion of potential financial savings. The subscription model, only $9.99 a month or whatever, it all adds up. And I think in general, people are actually paying more for the tools these days. App proliferation is a real problem. We had a fairly small 30-person client and had over 90 subscriptions to various apps. Obviously, that's out of control. Loss of control over upgrades. Operability, etc. And of course, multiple logins and data governance. You've got data, various cloud applications on premises, keeping track of it and making sure that it's protected and safe can be a challenge. And then security. It used to be reasonably clear that the perimeter was the firewall and everything within your office was fairly secure. and you protected it that way. Now your data is everywhere. It's on iPhones, Androids, iPads, etc. It's really a different challenge to secure. And of course, some risk remains. We've all heard the expression "too big to fail," and I'm sure at some point there will be a serious failure. Probably not extended, but of one of the large cloud services. So, cloud storage and virtual desktop infrastructure. Storing your files, if you're not an AEC company, storing your files in Office 365 is really a bit of a no-brainer. And there's a lot of advantages. Versioning, the ability to have more complex metadata about the files rather than just the file name and the date. Multi-user access to things like spreadsheets and Word documents and PowerPoints. Then, of course, accessibility, that you can get to anything from anywhere, really. We don't feel that Azure and Amazon Web Services are there yet for CAD, really simply because of the latency for accessing large files over an internet connection, unless you're using virtual desktop infrastructure, VDI. And VDI is essentially a powerful workstation hosted in the cloud that sits right next to your data and allows you to access it without the latency that I mentioned. Microsoft Azure has a sync functionality. We've been working with it here. It's a little bit difficult to prove as to whether it will work, but it's promising, and it's free. We partner with a company called WorkSpot that provides a really excellent VDI solution. The speed is really good, and it's in use at several larger AEC firms who want to have essentially the ability to have virtual offices and have everybody accessing the data very quickly from various remote locations. It leverages these really powerful Azure virtual machines with graphic processor units. It's a bit expensive. It's about $3,000 per year for a really powerful workstation, which might be about double what you pay for an actual workstation, but then you can run it on anything like a dumb terminal or $500 terminal. So is this cloud technology increasing productivity or saving you money? I don't think so as yet, and we'd like to help our clients increase their productivity. I don't think they're going to save any money over software costs. You're actually paying more from back of the napkin analysis in my mind. If you look at the chart over here, Microsoft's stock price was really flat for a number of years, even going back further than 2004. It was pretty flat. And they really turned things around, but that money is not coming from nowhere. It's coming out of your pockets. The problem before was people were not upgrading because there was no real reason to do so. If you had Word 2007, well, you could probably get away with using it for 5 years. People were not using the functionality, or we're not seeing the benefit of moving to the later versions. Now, of course, with the subscription pricing, you get the new versions, but you're locked into upgrading. Biggest potential offset is going to be in the reduction of on-site costs. The labor to manage servers, et cetera, on-site, that should be amortized into the cost of cloud services. Unfortunately for architectural engineering firms, there's probably 2 to 3 years of a hybrid scenario where you still have file servers and you'll have some data in the cloud. But I would say within 3 years, it will be pretty close to completely cloud-based storage. Productivity, I don't think there's been a lot of gains. That's my observation. And why is that? Generally, I think there's a lack of understanding of the available tools. It's information overload. There's too much stuff out there. People don't know what to use. And integration and automation, which to me is really critical for productivity, is actually very rare in the small, medium business market. People don't know how to do it. And that's where a company like EXP can help. They can come in and we can integrate and automate stuff. And then there's a lot of conflicting tools. Microsoft has messaging platforms. They've got Yammer, they've got Teams, they've got groups. People don't really know what to use. And I guess again, that's something that we can help. We can help advise you on what tools might work well for you. Then training and leadership is always an issue. And put together, it means there's little collective learning. And for me, productivity is a result of people using the same tools and leveraging each other's knowledge and experience to use them productively. How do you improve productivity? Well, I don't think there's any single path. All companies are different, but the first thing you want to do is look at where your time is going. And generally, rationalize and standardize. Reduce the number of things that people have to learn how to use. Standardize on them, make sure that people know how to access them, and then improve training and education. This is critical. People need to know how to use the tools they have, and then automate and integrate where possible, as I mentioned before. So for file access, project management, and collaboration, what do you own? Everybody who has Office 365 has got SharePoint. It's part of the subscription, at least at the levels that our clients are using. You can buy Exchange without SharePoint, but just about everybody has got SharePoint, and that's a web-based storage platform that's been around for a long time. You can create project sites, and you can actually, using the SharePoint task list, you can sync them with Microsoft Project. Not many people know that, but it actually works quite well. So you can have one person with Microsoft Project and then several people just updating their task statuses through SharePoint. External collaboration with partners, Office 365 groups. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. That's a free and very useful part of Office 365 that essentially combines email and SharePoint. And then there's some really inexpensive or free tools like PowerApps that you can create little apps, and I'll also give a demo of that. You can see a screenshot there of the little project expense app that I'll show you how we could create really quickly and easily. So Office 365 groups, it's SharePoint based. It's a sort of a one-click little website that has a dedicated group email. It could be the project name, 2018-01-01 at architecturalgroup.com, whatever. Get a notebook, file storage, calendar. They're customizable, and we would advise anybody who is going to use groups as their sort of distribution method to engage with something like EXP to get a customized template built that could be allow consistency. One of the great things about groups is that anybody with a Microsoft Office 365 account does not have to create a new login and password. You just grant them permission and they can get in. So obviously, just about everybody's going to have an Office 365 login. If you share a group with external participants, they don't have to re-authenticate. They can just use their existing account. So that's one of the principal benefits in my mind of groups. A couple of automation tools you already own. You've probably seen these buttons and wondered, what are they about? Basically, PowerApps is a no-code or a low-code development platform that you can create, iPhone or iPad or tablet-ready applications really quickly and easily. And Flow is a cloud-based workflow product that lets you integrate and transform data between various different systems. So as an exercise, we decided to do a little bit of customization and set ourselves a requirement to create an iPhone app to manage just basic expense time entry or expense entry and approval. Needed to be database driven using just Office 365 tools and no code whatsoever, and you had to be able to do it under 5 minutes. So I'm going to play a little video to which I'll talk along here and show you how we did that. So the first thing we did was we created a custom list called Project Expenses in SharePoint. Added some columns, the amount of the expense, just a number. To those of you not familiar with SharePoint, it's really easy to do this sort of stuff. Added the type of expense, hotel, meal, auto, etc. Then we wanted to relate it back to a pre-existing project list. So we added a project list column. And there we have a little database. We want to create an app, though, to expose it outside of the network. So created a little PowerApps. Boom, it's right there. You've got the little iPhone app that allows you to enter very simple expense related to a project. As soon as you save it, it's going to end up back in SharePoint. But now, say we want to approve or have an approval process around that. We click on Flow, you can start an approval as soon as a new list item is added. You specify to whom the approval should be sent, and now we've got a little approval workflow. And you'll see if I add another one now, that an email gets sent to the approver, which in this case is going to be myself. It says, please review. You've got an option to say yes or no, and to put a comment in if you're saying no. And then the submitter of the expense gets an email saying that it was approved. Very simple, very easy, but you can imagine, obviously there would be a lot more complexity to what you might want to do, but that's really under 5 minutes. The video itself is about 1.5 minutes there, but it really doesn't take more than 5 minutes to create a little iPhone or Surface Pro or tablet app or even Windows app that basically exposes SharePoint in a very concise and easy to use manner. So integration and automation, in my mind, key to productivity. Azure single sign-on supports up to 5 cloud apps natively. Again, not many people know that, but you can integrate with, various different applications. It could be your expense, time and expense entry, could be your HR application. Actually fairly easy, provided it uses the SAML standard, fairly easy to set up single sign-on. So you're just signing into Office 365 and you have access to your other applications. SharePoint workflows have been around for a long time. They're very powerful, a little bit like Flow, but native to SharePoint. Basically, you can have, complex business process such as approvals, notifications, routing, renaming, etc., built as a custom workflow that runs each time a document or a list item is created or edited. Flow, similar but cloud-based, and Flow has the advantage of connecting to a lot of third-party applications. There's a lot of them. It's relatively new, and there'll be a lot more over time, but it's a no-code way to essentially have interoperability between cloud-based systems. It's also a product called Azure Functions, which is very, very powerful. It's transactional. It costs per transaction, a tiny amount per transaction, but it can really do anything you want to do to integrate between 2 or 3 or 4 different applications. And obviously, there's development involved there, but if you can think it, you can probably do it, provided there is an open sort of API for the apps. And then there's lots of other third-party integration tools. We use one called Layer 2 Cloud Connector. It's about $450 to $1,100. And it'll basically integrate anything from your on-premises accounting system to SharePoint and vice versa, email to SharePoint, lots of different things. And it's very easy to use, and we can help you with that if you want. So earlier this year, we did a proof of concept just to see what we could do using inexpensive tools to create a integrated portal for a small to medium architectural engineering company. On the face of it, it's just a simple intranet or portal, company, homepage with aggregated content, list of offices, list of employees with their skills, training and compliance, and projects, list of active, inactive projects, Power BI or Excel reports, project task libraries that can be edited in Microsoft Project, and then the ability to share files with Office 365 groups. And then marketing automation, leads to prospects to clients, proposal management, and digital asset management. By digital asset management, I mean images and videos, etc., in Office 365. So this is a little map of the integration. We used QuickBooks Online, which is, it's probably not the best application for an AEC company, but it's very pervasive. They have millions and millions of users, and they have an open API. So we used Timesheets, which is also a QuickBooks product, QuickBooks, SharePoint, and then WordPress. And we were essentially able to have project and employee data flowing really well between all of these areas. So the timesheets would pull in the employees from QuickBooks and submit time and expense. QuickBooks Online would do the invoicing, etc., but also sync time and invoices back up to a data warehouse list of projects in SharePoint. And that allowed us to report essentially on those. So we could have interactive reports in SharePoint based upon the accounting data. And then we were able to manage the images and the project content and sync it out to a WordPress website, which almost all of our clients use WordPress for their public websites, and it's a database-driven content management system. So we were able to sync images and content from SharePoint out to the website. To me, analytics and business intelligence is a big gap in small, medium business in general, and in particular in architectural engineering companies. We think it's a really powerful thing to essentially create what we call a data warehouse in SharePoint, and that's a very simple list that takes your project data from where it exists, which is probably in your accounting system, and puts it into a very simple but detailed list that can show you where you are with everything. You know, assigned hours per project, what's been worked, what's been invoiced, what's projected, and then you can provide company-wide visibility so people understand what works ahead of people, where they are in particular projects, what projects are in trouble, and you can create interactive reports using Excel, which is actually pretty good. It can connect right to SharePoint. It's free, of course, well, at least you own it already. And Power BI, BI stands for Business Intelligence. That's very powerful, but it's about $10 per user per month, and it'll connect to a SharePoint list and let you do wonderful charts. Client relationship management. Most architectural engineering companies do not need a full-blown CRM system like Salesforce. They typically don't have, it might have a marketing person or a part-time marketing person. There's not a huge quantity of leads, but they do need to track them. And SharePoint can work just fine for that. Just keep it simple is our recommendation. Have a list of opportunities quantified by square footage, project revenue, potential person hours to execute the project, and have it move through 3 or 4 phases, just like preliminary, qualified, proposing, where you're actually doing the proposal, and closed if you get the business or don't get the business. And then you can quantify your opportunities to assist with hiring projections. That's one of the most difficult things in my experience for small businesses, is to keep on top of whether they should be hiring, how much work they have ahead of them, what's the probability of it coming in, etc. And again, I think company-wide visibility is really important. And there's really no reason why everybody in the team shouldn't understand what's out there, what's ahead of them. Then, of course, it's very easy to track sales process interactions, when you last contacted the client, potential client, or client about a new project. So marketing, we used a third-party tool that allowed us to have our project list data and then images, and then allowed you to select several reference projects and then produce a database-driven Word document or PowerPoint with the text, data elements, images and links to the website, etc. And very quickly, from a template, create a 20-page document with 10 reference projects in it. And that was actually fairly easy to do, just using a Word, Word macro product called Jungle Docs was actually the name of the product that we used. Then media, every architectural engineering firm we know has lots and lots of project photos. Managing them typically in a directory structure, which is actually a pretty difficult way to keep track of what ends up being thousands and thousands of images. And keeping them in SharePoint and syncing them out with your public website can be done. Requires a bit of integration, but one of the benefits of using a digital asset library is it'll manage multiple renditions. For example, you can see here in SharePoint, it's created a thumbnail, medium size, large, and then the original image. And you can add attributes that are database attributes, like project number, project type, square footage, design principle. And then it's much easier to go and find the subset of images that you want. And of course, you can also sync them out with your website. Searching is a lot easier. So we actually think, as a starting point, just getting your images into SharePoint is probably a pretty quick win. Knowledge and skills management, very powerful capabilities in SharePoint. When you boil it down to the small medium business market, something like enterprise keywords, which is essentially the ability to tag any content with consistent keywords. So if somebody's entered concrete before, for example, it'll be available as a selection item in the enterprise keywords element of the list over here. So essentially a very quick and easy way to categorize content amongst various different places in SharePoint where you're sharing it. SharePoint's also a great way to keep track of employee certifications and skills, who's done what training, sign off on training, and then you can also have a very simple knowledge base or Q&A section in a website. Security and compliance, as I mentioned earlier, the perimeter is gone. You really don't have this, we're safe behind the firewall scenario anymore. You've got to really look at security and how it's managed and put some time and effort into managing it, especially if you have compliance requirements from the government and as an international architectural engineering construction company, you could have GDPR requirements as well. Regardless, we recommend that you work to the National Institute of Standards and Technology standards. And there's lots and lots of documentation on that. What we like to think we can do well is boil it down to a workable, fairly lightweight security and compliance program that's suitable for a small, medium business that doesn't overload people with policies, procedures, etc. We actually like to think we can get away with one detailed IT security and acceptable use policy that everybody can sign off on and understand. And it's really important to have good new hire and termination policies. Make sure that people are only given access to systems that they should have access to. Devices should be encrypted by default. You should have a security training and education program for new hires, and then once a year, just very simple phishing, stuff like that. You've got to educate people on it. The only way to do it is to have a program and have it be consistent and refreshed periodically. We recommend multi-factor authentication for Office 365. It's actually fairly easy to implement, and you already own it, most likely. Essentially, it uses a little app on your phone to give you a one-time code when you're logging in outside of the network. And it means if somebody gets your password, they're not going to be able to get into your account. So that's the big benefit. I can't talk in too much detail about that, but it's a very powerful security asset. And then data labeling is now available in SharePoint and Outlook. Essentially, if you have classified or personal identifiable information or patient healthcare information, you can label it as such in SharePoint and Outlook with centralized categories, and then you can have policies that dictate how you manage that, whether it's encrypted, et cetera, or whether it can be emailed. Data loss prevention is, again, built into Office 365. That lets you define policies such as do not let a document with 50 social security numbers be emailed, that sort of thing. Very, very customizable, and again, a good tool to prevent data leaving your organization in ways that you would not want it to be. And then digital rights management lets you embed security right in the document, so even if you send a Word document outside of the network via email, you can control whether it's printed, emailed, forwarded, etc. Very powerful. Anybody who'd like more information on small, medium business NIST compliance, I've got a document, a 2-page document that I put together that I'd be happy to email on request. Basic security checklist. We think you should do an annual risk assessment. It doesn't have to be a hugely intensive process, but once a year at least, you should sit down, and we can help you with this, and work through the various parts of your IT system and establish areas of risk, and then work through addressing those areas of risk. Everybody should have a firewall with intrusion prevention, antivirus, anti-malware, anti-phishing. It's a no-brainer. You need to write this down in a policy now. People understand and sign off on the policy. Just getting a report that can't hear. Okay. Would somebody mind putting in a Q&A as to whether they can hear me? Okay, yeah, we just had a report that somebody couldn't hear me, so I was concerned, so we'll continue. We're just about to wrap up and enter the Q&A session. As I mentioned, strong password policy with 30 days maximum change requirements, deploy multi-factor authentication if possible, encrypt all devices via group policy, implement mobile device management. You actually probably already own that with Office 365. It allows you to essentially ensure that devices are encrypted, that they can be remotely wiped, etc. And it's really important because those little phones are sort of repositories of data with email and attachments, etc. Then you need to have a basic training and education program. Every time somebody's hired, they should get a simple overview of security, risks, processes, etc. And then you should have everybody go through it yearly. Then you need to know where your data is. It's as simple as that. If you have classified or confidential information, you need to know where it is. It cannot be interspersed throughout your organization. So to wrap things up, before we go into the question and answer session, it's time to get organized in my mind. You've gone through moving to Office 365. Now you should start using some of the tools that you have and get some productivity gains out of them. SharePoint, it's very flexible, powerful, and easy to use, and we can help you with that. Lots of people use Excel to manage business processes, and those can be much more powerful in SharePoint with approval workflows, etc., and not really that complicated to set up. I think moving your images into SharePoint is a great way to manage them. Office 365 groups, project communication and file exchange. Again, you own it already. It's got the big benefit of single sign-on for folks outside your organization. So, it doesn't mean yet another login and password for everybody who's involved in the project team, provided they're using Microsoft products already. And then Flow, you can automate approvals, other tasks. PowerApps, create mini apps for data collection, site recording, etc. And then, of course, the security tools, lots of acronyms. Everybody loves acronyms. Multi-factor authentication, essentially something you know and something you have. Mobile device management, managing those iPhones, Androids out in the field. Single sign-on. You can integrate Office 365 security with other applications. Data loss prevention, stop people from emailing confidential stuff when they shouldn't be. And digital rights management. If stuff is sent outside of the organization, make sure it doesn't get misused. We can create a SharePoint portal in about a day, basic, through an on-site session, pull together directories, clients, employees, partners, a list of projects, image library, CRM, and knowledge base. This would not include accounting system integration, but that could be an additional piece of work. So we'll go over to question and answers. Like I mentioned at the start, use the Q&A button to ask a question, and I will do my best to answer them. But please remember, you can always email me after this, and I'll be happy to answer any questions via email or pick up the phone and talk to you. So I'll start working through. Hopefully we have some questions. Here we go. So question was, if you don't already plan on addressing it, can you expand on the reach of GDPR, especially for those who don't work in the EU or hire EU citizens? That's a big topic, but essentially my understanding is if you are storing personal information of European citizens, and those could be clients, not necessarily employees, you need to protect it. And you need to know where it is, and you need to de-identify it or encrypt it. So the chances of you being audited by a European agency are probably nil, but you need to be aware of it. And like any type of compliance, you need to know what sort of data you have and have a plan for where you're going to put it and how you're going to protect it. And really, the GDPR is just an extension of that. If you've got employee healthcare information in your file system, you need to be aware of that and you need to protect it. So to me, it's just an extension of that duty of care you have to existing data already. Another question was, isn't there a trend away from frequent password changes in favor of longer passwords that expire far less frequently, like never? Yeah, there is actually. one of the downsides of high complexity password policies is that people end up writing them down in yellow stickies because they can't remember them. And of course, a laptop with a yellow sticky on it is probably your #1 security risk if it's stolen. So using passphrases with longer expiration times is a great way to do it. A passphrase would be like a sentence with capitalization at each word, and a lot easier to remember. So yeah, I agree with that. However you do it, you need to address the fact that people need to have complexity in place for access to the system. You cannot, in my mind, really have passwords that never expire, which is reasonably common. I think because people have always felt, we're just a little architectural firm in the middle of Seattle. Who would want our stuff? Well, the threats are expanding. They're getting craftier. Phishing is a big deal. If people get your password, they can do really nasty things to you. So yeah, you need to address it one way or the other. And passphrase actually is a great way to do it. Another question: what classifies as personal info? Yes, an email address, phone numbers, home addresses. Email address is probably borderline for GDPR because it's public, generally publicly accessible. I would think the standard would be more phone numbers, home addresses, etc. But I think you need to treat lists of personal data as data you need to protect, whatever it is. If you have a client list with personal email addresses, you need to protect that. Another question: we have all of our project lists and access. Can that be stored or converted to SharePoint? Yes, very, very easily. And really, SharePoint is probably the next generation for people who have been using Access. Access was a powerful tool, easy to use, limited really to on-premises because it required a file to execute against a database that was on-premises. If you're using Access to manage your CRM, transferring it to SharePoint, provided you don't have a huge amount of Visual Basic customization, is fairly straightforward. And you have the advantage that you can get to it from anywhere without VPN, etc. Good question. So a couple of other questions. How would VDI work in a hybrid environment? Well, you would need to have a sync tool. There's a couple of commercial ones, Panzera. I would essentially sync your data between your local premises and Amazon Web Services or Azure so that the file locking was taken care of. So that if you tried to open a file through VDI or through a local workstation, there would not be any contention for ownership of the file. Next question is: how does the multi-factor authentication work with Office 365? Very simply, you download a little application which goes on your phone that produces a one-time password each time you try to log in. And it's not every time, so I mean it would be really onerous. But once you authenticate once on a device with the multi-factor authentication code, I think you've got 3 days before it asks you again. And if you log in again during that 3 days, it's not going to ask you again. So it's really not that onerous. But it does mean if somebody gets access to your account, your password, they can't get into your email unless they have your phone as well, which is an unlikely scenario. The question was, can you connect to SharePoint document libraries as a mapped drive? The simple answer is yes. It's not particularly hard, but yes, you could have documents in SharePoint that showed up as a mapped drive on your local computer. You can also sync with them through the sync tool. It's actually pretty easy to do, and one of our consultants could definitely help with that. How does Excel connect to SharePoint for reporting? Again, very simple. You go to the Get Data tab in Excel. It'll let you choose from online services. SharePoint's right there. And you can do really powerful pivot table type reports in Excel, and you can drop them into SharePoint as a web part, and there's no additional cost for the software. Power BI does an even nicer job, but it's $10 per per user per month. We would like to integrate our accounting system with SharePoint for project reporting. How difficult is this and what would it cost? Well, the tool we use will connect to just about anything. It's about $1,000 one-time purchase and then a few $100 maintenance per month. And it can really do just about anything. So, you know, accounting system to SharePoint, SharePoint to accounting system, depends on the accounting system functionality. That's just one tool. There's lots out there, but integration, I think, is really important because you want the same data in every place where people are viewing it. It can't really be out of date by more than, you know, 15 minutes or half an hour or whatever. So we're getting close to the end of our time here. Like I said, if anybody would like to shoot me an email after the meeting, I'd be happy to talk to them. And thank you all for your time joining today. A lot of good questions, and we'll be holding these webinars hopefully fairly regularly on different subjects over the next, you know, on an ongoing basis, probably once every quarter or every 6 months. We're trying to reach out to our clients in a more organized fashion. And again, thank you for your participation, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.